to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah. God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life.
Because it's not till then that it's really real. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily there's more to you than you think.
Tim, it's great to be sitting down here with you, man.
So I'm honored, man. Really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when I first, and this is something that's really interesting because I knew that human trafficking was a thing. And I understood the term, I understood what it actually was, but I really had no idea until this year that the extent to which this is happening in the world. And some of the statistics, when I started following you and I got introduced to what you were doing, that was one of the first things that really came about. One, it's shocking to me that I try to be as tapped in as I can be to what's going on in the world. It's not like I'm intentionally looking away, but it just hadn't been presented to me in a way where it caught my attention enough to realize, holy shit, this is a major epidemic problem going on in the world. And so I definitely want to talk about how that's kind of now finally just starting to creep into the mainstream narrative. But also, if you would, just talk about some of these statistics to let people know, perhaps for the first time, like me 6 months ago, where I'm really starting to understand how deep this problem is and how pervasive it is in the world.
Yeah, this is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. That alone should get everybody's attention. And the numbers, you talk about modern day slavery, human trafficking. I mean, what it is people who don't control themselves. They're wholly owned by somebody else, whether it's for labor or for sex. Usually, if you're the one, you're going to eventually be the other one. And even organ harvesting. Those numbers are somewhere around 30 million people. That's more people enslaved today than ever before in the history of the world. And I think, we read our history books and we think, I read about that. Slavery was eradicated, the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, the transatlantic slave trade is over. And not to at all report or
downplay that
at all. There's nothing worse in the world than the transatlantic slave
what you've
trade.
dedicated your life to fighting.
Right. But if you added up all the people that were enslaved during that transatlantic slave trade period, there are more people just alive today in slavery than all of those together over that combined 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade, just to give some perspective of what we are talking about. The United States, oftentimes people say, well, that doesn't affect us here. That's something far, far away. Wrong. We are the number one demand. We are the number one consumers of child exploitation materials, child rape videos. I just call them what they are. We're the number one demand. We're the ones driving the demand. We're traveling out, sex tourists who are going out and engaging in this activity. A startling statistic from the State Department this year, the United States is in the top 3 now for destination countries for human trafficking. The traffickers want to get the people, the kids, the women into our markets because it's here where they can make a lot of money.
Top dollar.
Yep.
That is absolutely terrifying and really illuminating to realize that this is something that's in the zeitgeist. People talking about still the damage and the trauma that occurred from the slavery in the transatlantic period. And it's still happening. It's still happening. And yes, all of the healing, all of the support of all disenfranchised communities, all communities that have suffered trauma from every different race and culture, we always have to fight for them and support that healing. And that's a part of your process too. I'm sure we'll talk about that, the integration, the healing afterwards. Yeah. But right now, this very moment, there's 30 million people in slavery.
Yes.
And the champions for those people, they're fewer and farther between than you would imagine when there's this atrocity that's happening.
Yeah, people don't want to talk about it. Every time we come home from a mission and you're so embedded in it and you've seen it and it's just ugly and it hurts and you come home and you see what the headline is. The headlines of the day It's, some sensational thing, usually someone poking someone else, some political thing. And it's just like, what? How is this what's making it to the top? When there are millions of people, children, 2 million children alone are forced into commercial sex every year. How is that not the headline every day until we solve that? And it's just not. People don't want to look at it. It hurts, I guess. It hurts too much to look at it.
It does hurt, but that's, if you have any modicum of courage, you got to look at that with your eyes wide open, and just stare at it and let the tears fall. I mean, that's what I did with my wife recently when we watched the documentary that you put out, Operation Tucson.
Yeah.
When we watched that, I mean, you watch it and it hurts. It hurts your heart. It hurts your eyes. You feel it, and you feel feeling it. You feel those moments where you have an astronomical amount of kids, by the way, 9 kids. Yeah. And you watch you as an amazing father loving these kids. And then you see these moments where you fall in love with these kids. And yes, you're this badass operator that's going to rescue them, but you're also a dad. You're also a man, a human. And it just wrecks you to see it.
In fact, I think it's in that documentary. It tells the story of the first time that I came across a real child from, when I started out the first couple of years, it was just responding to this tsunami of child exploitation material that was hitting our country, our end user, our pedophiles, and we were getting these pedophiles and knocking them off. And then you'd see these images of these kids and just, where are they? How can we find them? Today, there's tools. Homeland Security has amazing tools to identify some of these kids, but back then we didn't. And it was breaking my heart. But the first time I saw one of those kids, he was being brought across the border by this horrible trafficker pedophile who was kidnapping kids in Mexico, bringing them across into the United States, into California, in San Bernardino, and he had a makeshift kind of child porn studio, and he would make videos.
Yeah, he built a little set inside of a warehouse where he would lock people in and shoot child rape videos.
Right. And there's this kid. We pulled him out of the van, and I was the case agent on the case, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're one of the kids from I recognized him, And he, at one point, he comes running to me and just hugs me. And he says in perfect English, it was shocked me because the English was a result of having been groomed by this guy for years. It turns out he's only 5 years old. And he just says to me, I don't belong here. And to hear a 5-year-old say, I don't belong here in that context, because he knows what's happening to him, it almost broke me. And then I went home after that operation 2 or 3 days later, because then we had to raid the place up in San Bernardino. We found a total of 12 kids that this guy was doing the same thing to. I went home and I saw my children. And something happened to me because I thought, wait, my kids were only 15 miles from the place where we got this little boy out, that close. And my kids are happy and they're running around and daddy hugging me. And I don't know what happened, something mentally. I still got to figure it out. I should probably go get some help, but because it happens frequently.
I think it's called being a human.
And I literally, my knees gave out. I fell down and I'm not proud of this, but I'm just sobbing like a baby. My wife had to come grab me. I think she thought I was having a heart attack or something because I couldn't even talk. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. It was seeing my kids and almost like guilt.
Yeah.
Like, how can they be so happy when millions are being raped? Like, it's just insane, right? And my wife, without her, I would be doing none of this, and she helped me, and she reminded me that no matter the pain I feel, it's nothing relative to the pain of these kids. And that's the message I'd give everybody is It hurts to look at this. It hurts to engage it. Like you said, you and your wife cried, and you felt that pain but that's the sacrifice we all have to make so that we can engage it, so we can alleviate a pain that we can't even comprehend.
It's the smallest amount of courage to just open your eyes and see. And, look, all of us are going to be able to contribute in different ways, but that awareness and spreading the message and being champions for those who have no champions, those who have no hope.
Yeah.
And that's another big message from that same documentary when you went to rescue some young women in Haiti. They were hopeless. This was their fate they were resigned to. And then all of a sudden there was hope because you were willing to step up and do something. And that changes the whole landscape. That changes the possibility of what what is available out there. How many people have you rescued? Over 1,000, right? With Operation
Over
Underground Rail?
4,000.
4,000.
Yeah, over 4,000, and we're close to 3,000 arrests now. And it's true what you say. I was thinking about those survivors there. I mean, they were literally children who were scooped up after the earthquake in 2010. They were 6, 7 years old, and they were told, anytime there's a earthquake or some kind of disaster, especially in a developing country, count on it. The traffickers are coming in. It's harvest time, because that earthquake produced about 500,000 orphans overnight. And the traffickers came in. So this woman trafficker, her name's Cho. You introduced her in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
She takes this little girl. Her parents are dead. I'll take you in. I'll take care of you. Turns her into a sex slave. And this little girl is now the brothel she's forced to work in is this dungeon on this street in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. A little red steel door. No one's gonna open that door. She has no reason to believe anyone will ever open that door to do anything but come in and rape her. And what we do at our foundation, working with the police, we go intentionally to those darkest corners. I mean, think of this girl. She's not only in an obscure country, she's in the darkest corner of that obscure country behind a little red door. And I've thought a lot about that, that's where we will go. We'll go anywhere and everywhere. And it does change the dynamic. And it's not just us. There's other groups, many groups doing this. But there's hope now where there wasn't hope before. There's hope for anybody now. Because there's people willing to engage.
It seems to me that, one of the challenges that a lot of high-level operators experience, who I've talked to and interviewed a bunch of them, and I'm friends with many, that have transitioned out of service, out of military duty. But they still, most of them, sometimes some people have some, bad sentiments towards our military, perhaps because of the missions that they've been sent on. We don't agree with the political agendas that are there. But you talk to these people, they're heroes in their heart. They're not doing this because they have some kind of bloodlust. They want to help. Right. They want to serve. Like, that's their intention. And whether you agree or not with the political agenda that sent them to this particular country to do this thing, you cannot question the integrity of the heart of that person. But it seems like as this message becomes aware, and as what you're doing, starts to come out, I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people like, oh yeah, I'm not scared of dark corners. Like, right. I know dark corners well, and they don't scare me at all. And the people that are the cowards that are imprisoning these women and children, like, I've dealt with a lot worse than them. So fucking Hoka, let's go.
That's exactly right. These guys, and that's who we recruit.
Yeah,
people seasoned, experienced, who are not afraid of the dark corners. But what we do that perhaps wasn't part of their other life. You talk about like the political kind of ambiguity, like who. Is this what we should be doing?
Right.
This one is easy.
It's clear. It's black and white.
Right.
What any warrior would dream for.
Right.
Clear and present evil, and the ability to help truly innocent. I mean, it's hard to find a war, where it's that clear. Right. Maybe go back to World War II and we're fighting, the Nazi ideology. But and there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good that's been done by the military. I'm not saying that, but there's always some ambiguity. But there's no ambiguity here.
Right.
None.
It's very clear. And when you see one of these children that comes out, and knowing what happened to them, and knowing now they have a life of freedom, it even emphasizes more that point, that this is really just good and evil, and there's the line is drawn.
Yeah. And maybe and this goes into another thing that you're actually working on, and is the Nazarene Fund, which is working on these criminal and nefarious organizations are also interwoven with terror organizations,
yes.
interwoven with the worst of the worst, and ISIS being another one of these clear and present evils
yes.
that has existed. Now, it's difficult to know who's ISIS and not sometimes, I suppose, but ISIS came in, and I'll let you tell this story, but that's another area where they not only raped and killed, but they also harvested humans for trafficking, in the same way. Another clear delineation of, okay, here's clear evil. And here's the opportunity in a very dark and nasty place of the world, out in the Middle East, where it's challenging for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The Nazarene Fund is doing amazing work. Glenn Beck founded it in 2015 when ISIS comes rolling in, like you indicated. And I think few people knew what was happening. We knew ISIS was doing something. They rolled into these beautiful villages in northern Iraq that really are kind of autonomous in a lot of ways, always have been. They're centuries old. Mm-hmm. Villages, Yazidi, Christian villages, and ISIS, who saw these people as less than human, just killed the men, stole the women and the children, and created some of the largest sex slave markets that we've ever seen ever in the history of the world. And the Nazarene Fund works to get them out, working with local partners, extracting them, moving them. We've moved 10,000 people out of harm's way, rebuild their villages. And still to this day, we are extracting dozens of children who are still stuck. And ISIS is making a comeback. It's very scary. Just because they don't have any sovereign territory doesn't mean they're no longer a threat. They still exist, and they're growing, and they're recruiting, and they're going to come back. And they still have close to 3,000 women and children that we can't find, that we know they're with them. And those are the ones we're going and extracting right now.
Yeah, it's terrifying to just really understand how much evil still exists.
Yes.
How much like true evil still exists out there. And that's, I think, again, that's the warrior call. That's the bell that's being rung. And that's certainly something that I felt. And obviously I'm not an operator. It's not my role to do that. My role is to sit here in this chair and spread as much awareness and try to shine as much light on this as possible. But, I know that there'll be people listening to this, and as this spreads, more and more people will rally to the cause, because we want to know that we're doing some good in the world. We want to really know that. And it's one thing to, say, I pay my taxes, I'm nice to my neighbors and whatever. But when you can see, and I'd love for you to talk about it, like when you have the feeling that you've made a successful raid and you see kids who are lost and desolate and hopeless and being terrorized and tortured, and you know that you helped them. I mean, there can probably be fewer things in our opportunity to live our life that are more rewarding and satisfying than to know that you did that good.
It's true. It is. There's nothing. I mean, it makes all the darkness worth it just to be part
For sure.
of something like that. And really, our team includes everybody. In fact, I'd say the most important thing people can do is not be an operator, is do what we're doing right now, is talk about it, spread it. We have historical precedents for how you get rid of this, how you get rid of a societal plague like slavery. Look at the transatlantic slave trade, using that as an example again. As much as I love Abraham Lincoln, it's not that he just raised his hand one day and said, I'm going to end this. In fact, he was singing a different tune when he came into the presidency. What happened was this. They didn't have the technology we have today, but they talked. They spread awareness. They wrote books. The abolitionist movement, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, these amazing people who got so loud. In fact, when Lincoln met a famous abolitionist in the White House, he said to her, so you're the lady that wrote the book that started this war. Even he recognized. And so that's what we need to do is, why the mainstream media won't make this the headlines every day is probably a reflection of us in our society, that we aren't making it a big deal. They're just they're giving us what we want. Right now, I think people want to be outraged on every side. And I don't care the political spectrum. We want that dopamine hit. We want to be pissed. And so they're giving it to us. And sometimes it's sensational, oftentimes. And you're wondering, is that really something worth being pissed about? Or, I'm not talking about anything recent. I'm talking about decades and decades. And
it's certainly recent as well.
And recent. And what we want to do is let's find something we can all be outraged together on. We all agree on. There's one thing left on the table that we all agree on, maybe only one thing. And that is that children shouldn't be kidnapped, trafficked, raped, bought, sold. So let's rally around that, and let's make sure the media knows that's what we're interested in. Then they will hopefully start responding with the headlines that we want.
If you were to hypothesize media being a benevolent force that wasn't trying, or at least standing aside as they were dividing the nation, this would be the rallying cry.
Yes.
This would be the rallying cry of every politician to be like, look, whatever, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter, whatever else. There's 30 million slaves going on. 2 million of them are children being exploited. Let's all rally together and let's go arm in arm and let's end this together as a human race and a human species. And then when we're done, I promise you're allowed to sling shit at your neighbor if you really want. But for the time being, let's focus on this one thing.
Yeah, I've said it so many times in those almost exact words. Like, let's solve this together. Then we can get into our blue and red tribal wars and do our. But let's just come together on this right now, because this is serious. And they're children.
Yeah. Those petty differences only make sense in the absence of something as evil as this.
Exactly.
Like if everything's cool, fuck with your neighbor, like you be in your homeowners association and yell at somebody because the basketball goal is facing the wrong direction and it causes glint in your window. Fine. Like, go and have your little disagreements, but not while there's 2 million
Right.
child sex slaves. Like, no, like put all of that shit aside
100%.
for now.
That's exactly the message we need out there.
And it's hard to argue with that message too, you know. And that's also it's been one of the challenging things for me because, you know, during this lockdown, part of the pandemic, there's been very little discussion about the impact on children,
Right.
you know, on domestic abuse, on child abuse. You know, my sister works as CASA, you know, a special advocate for children in the adoptive care system, and they've found like a 300% incidence of
Yeah.
really, really terrible child abuse that's been going on because schools aren't in, and that's where they usually catch a lot of this.
That's
And then
exactly
people are
it.
at home drinking and they're frustrated. But you'll see these tiny little headlines again, but nobody's really talking about it to make us aware of like, all right, let's just be aware of what we're doing. Let's just not do this blindly. You know,
We did it blindly. We've been following. The FBI warned us in March that there's going to be an unintended consequence of shutting everything down, just in the world of child exploitation. And sure enough, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has seen an increase, millions of additional reports of abuse. And these are just reports. We won't know until later how bad it was. But these reports have been coming in millions in excess of what it did last year.
I saw some stats on one of the other, I forget which, maybe Rescue Her, or one of the other different Instagram, you know, organizations that I follow, and they said it was over a 90% increase year over year. So from January to July in 2019 versus January to July in 2020, there was a 90% increase, uptick. 90%, almost double.
That's exactly right. And we have law enforcement partners who are all internationally who are also monitoring the darknet. And these guys, the pedophiles, remember, they're home too. And they're home and bored and on their laptops and on their iPhones. And they're talking to each other. We see the chatter. Harvest time. These are the words. It's harvest time, guys. The kids are sitting ducks. They're home. Parents aren't paying attention. They're scavenging for their jobs, for their food, you know, trying to make ends meet. The kids are told, sit in the corner with your laptop, with your iPad, with your, you know, iPhone. And these guys are accessing our kids. They're experts. They know how to do it. So many times these kids are like at home gaming, right? And mom and dad, because when we were kids, when you played a computer game, you played the computer. And they don't realize, no, your kid's playing somebody else who's pretending to be 9 years old. He's actually a 60-year-old pedophile trying to access your kid. We're seeing these cases happening all the time.
So in those like massive multiplayer games, those third-person shooters or whatever, where you have headsets and you're talking to somebody, they're actually infiltrating that.
Absolutely.
Fuck.
Absolutely, they are. We just 30 miles from my house about 2 months ago, a 42-year-old guy was arrested. The AG's office caught him. He was gaming on some little kid game with two 6-year-old girls from Indiana, 6 years old. He got them to take all their clothes off and got them to take naked pictures of themselves and send to him. Luckily, again, he was caught, but the parents were like, I had no idea. I thought my kids were playing with other kids or the computer. Parents just don't realize. Like, you're inviting pedophiles right into your home by turning that function on the game that says play with anyone, right? They can come in and access your kid and play a game. It's horrifying.
I saw something from that came out of California where they were actually lowering the sentencing for child rape and pedophilia. And some like, it seems like the weirdest time in the world that you would make that move. And it made absolutely no sense to me. Does that make any sense to you that there would be movements? And I think we talked about this briefly on the phone, but it's like there's almost a movement to normalize it in a weird and sick way.
Well, we're dealing with something crazy right now because when I was an agent, a lot of us were undercover, you know, online trying to find out what's going on. And there's this organization called the North American Man Boy Love Association, NAMBLA. I don't know if you've ever heard of NAMBLA.
Sounds like a joke.
Yeah, South Park has made fun of them because it sounds like a joke, but they are an actual organization that has existed for decades, trying to legalize, trying to decriminalize and normalize sex between men and children. And they have all these studies they put out and how studies show that children can have like orgasmic type responses, which of course they can. They're adults in embryo, like they're human beings. But that's no justification. But for saying which they're saying is So we should normalize it. Who better to teach that child? Let that child experience the joys of sex. I mean, these are the arguments that we were watching in a corner. Now they're out. It's in mainstream. It's being, pedophilia is in many corners right now and it's growing. It's not a crime. It's who you are, and it should be accepted. This is where we're going right now. And you watch what's going to happen. I predict in the next 10 years, emancipation laws where, some of these child actors use emancipation laws to be able to be independent. You watch what's going to happen. They're going to go to certain organizations. These kids, 12 years old, they're going to emancipate and marry some 40-year-old pedophiles. I mean, this is, I think, where we're going if we don't fight back.
Right. And it's just a massive disregard for how manipulatively influential somebody could be and how predatory someone could be to basically brainwash somebody, which there is, I guess, some modicum of agency always, even when you're a child. But when you have a fully grown adult with, manipulative strategy and language and power and everything else that's convincing some 12-year-old to emancipate themselves, that's not free will. That's not agency. That's not choice.
Exactly.
That's predation.
We have the advantage of we take care of over 5,000 survivors. So if we rescue 30 kids in an operation and take them to a place where there's already 100 kids at that institution, at that facility to aftercare, we take all of them, right? So we actually take care of a lot more than we actually rescue. And so over 5,000. So we get access and understand this. I've seen the brain of a 12-year-old girl who's been raped many times by an adult. And the brain scan looks identical to the brain scan of a child the same age who was in a traumatic car accident, has a traumatic brain injury. Like, that's what happens. Like, the science actually proves the opposite. Children are not equipped for this. And they are not in a position, like you said, to make those kind of decisions about having sex with adults. And if we don't stand up and here, and to the point of why these things get lost and the media is not talking, because children, unlike adults, children can't organize themselves. They can't protest. They can't riot. They can't do those things. And if we don't do it for them, they're gone and they're going to be forgotten. That's why when the lockdowns happened, no one thought to consider what will happen to our children, because they're the silent in the corner that if you don't, you're not listening to them. It's time to listen to them and be their voice.
And the thing is, parents, like all parents, like, it's not enough if you're a parent, and even if you have parental energy, even if you're not a parent, if you understand what that is to be a father or to be a mother, all the kids of the world are our kids, and we're all their parents in a certain level. So it is our job to stand where they can't stand. It's all of our responsibility. But all too often we get too narrow-minded, myopically focused. Well, my kids are fine. Maybe they're fine, but you don't know if they're playing games. Like, be very mindful of your own kids, but also know that everybody's your kid. We're one world. We're one family.
That message is so important. I learned that the hard way when I started in this work. I remember the first child exploitation case I had, and I see these little boys. They're like 7, 6, 8 years old, just being raped by this guy in this video. It's a case we did that. We just raided the guy's house. And I remember falling to my knees, dry heaving into the trash can. And I'm just like going nuts. I jump into my car. I drive to my kid's school. I check them out. I lie and say they have to go to the dentist. I just get them out. I take them home. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm just sobbing and hugging my kids. And I'm just like, I can't go back to work. So I actually had to get professional help. And they mandate us to go see, mental health providers to help us. And I learned a process I could go through to block from seeing from kind of automatically superimposing my children's faces, which I was doing, onto all these victims. And I learned how to not do that. And I went and functioned that way for years. A decade later, I'm doing an operation where I'm walking into a false, it's a trafficking center posing as an orphanage. They're selling these kids. And it started happening again. I started seeing, I have 9 kids, right? So it's easy for me to, I can't help it. It's like every age I got one, right? I got a kid to put the face on.
Yeah.
And something told me, let it go. Don't utilize the mechanism. Let it happen. Let it happen. And I did. And these kids became my kids. And all of a sudden I realized at the end of that case, I never should have done that.
Never
10
should have
years
shut
ago.
it off.
I never should have shut it off, because what wouldn't you do for your kid? All of a sudden, I'm pushing the envelope. We're doing things I never would have done. And it was that very case that literally 2 of those kids in that case became my kids. And it worked, right? And so that's what I tell people is, don't shy away from that. If you accidentally, or if your mind goes there and superimposes your own kids or your nieces and nephews, grandkids' faces, let it happen.
Have the courage.
Have the courage and be the parent, because that kid's got no one. The only adult in that kid's life is trying to rape them or sell them, to have their organs cut out of them, or something horrific. Be the parent.
There's a concept called sacred rage. And, there's road rage. Obviously, somebody cuts you off and you just have a short fuse and like, stop honking and fucking flipping them off. It's fine. You're okay. I know you got a little scared, but like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's rage is like, you shouldn't, if you have a big problem with that, go work on that. But then there's the sacred rage, and the sacred rage of, I've just seen some horrible injustice and now I'm filled with a fire and with a passion that's going to give me courage to go into those dark and scary places and see those things and commit myself to a greater cause. And I think that's something that we all need to get back in touch with, is not just outrage and not just rage, not just anger, but the sacredness of that feeling of like, no, this is wrong.
Righteous
and I will
indignation.
not stand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We need more righteous indignation, because I agree with you. I think our bodies have a need for it, but we get the counterfeit, which is like this false outrage.
Yeah.
Over like, really? You're pissed about that?
Right.
Right? I agree with you. I think the key is educating people, showing them what it is, and they will attach to it and be and have that sacred rage, that righteous indignation.
Well, I think that's a beautiful thing that you're doing by bringing cameras along with you on these things, because when you see it for real, and it's not a reenactment. This isn't some Hallmark movie
Right.
where you're getting some shitty actor,
Yeah.
some B actor to kind of play this out. Side note, the worst of those is those like historical epics that they reenact where people are like half-ass fighting, and I'm like, stop, just stop. It's not illustrating anything. You guys just kind of hanging out. But that's not what this is. That's not what Operation Tucson was. No, this is real footage of you going in there and doing it. And of course you shield the most graphic of the graphic footage,
Sure.
But
Yeah.
there's that point where it just goes dark and like, look, we had to cut out this kid being raped, which was caught on film here. And you feel it. You feel the energy. You see it in your face. You see it in everybody there. And that's a story that, even though it's just one little microcosm, it's one little anecdote, out of the millions, then it wakes you up.
That's
and
right.
then you feel that thing. And I think that's really important. So it's important to be storytellers here. And I think that's another great service you're doing, not just being an operator, but a storyteller and telling the stories
Yep.
through these moving pictures.
Storytellers are truly the true heroes in this cause. They really are. You're a storyteller, and you're helping us tell our story. It's what's going to solve this. Because and again, I learned from my heroes of that original Underground Railroad and the abolitionist movement. That's what they did. They got graphic. They started saying what it was, showing what it was, and people, it shocked their systems. That was the beginning of the end of slavery. And for some reason, they didn't organize and do it until the 19th century, after 400 years. But we have our chance to do it right now.
At this point in the podcast, Tim Ballard tells an incredible story about a recent rescue in which the government played a really supportive role in helping him execute the mission at hand. When we return, we're going to dive right into my own commentary on the subject after redacting the details that are still sensitive about this story. But rest assured, everything happened in the way that it should, and the mission was a success. Yeah, I mean, it's very much, we all watched Liam Neeson's Taken, and I think we have some idea that maybe every once in a blue moon that happens, but we don't realize that that's happening all the time.
Right.
That people are being taken, and that there are people with a special set of skills, that are out there actually doing the work to bring them home.
Yeah.
But not enough people doing that, but I think I can see that changing. And also, I want to take a moment to celebrate the government working as a government should. Like, all too often we hide behind bureaucracy as if like, it's bureaucratic. We got to go through this agency and this agency. Passports, passports are hard. It shouldn't be like that. There should be a human being ultimately be like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I know who I can call to get this done, and we just get this done.
Exactly right.
And like, that's the way any efficient government should work. We should never hide behind our bureaucracy or this is hard. Like, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So
and
I'm
we're
glad
very
they did.
hopeful. We're very hopeful that we're going to see more of that from the government moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at, and this is something that, when you look at society that's also in a weird way condoning behavior that's completely out of line, so you've seen, I was someone who actually witnessed this firsthand. And I know you have, something else that you were talking about, a show that you were talking about, but my former partner, Whitney Miller, was Miss United States. So as she was competing, I went to the national competition out in Washington, D.C. And as I was there, they go by age bracket leading up to, her age group, which is just regular Miss United States. So then there's teen, which is like 18 to whatever, 20. And then there's the preteen ones. So there's like two age brackets, like, 16 to 18, 14 to 16. Then there's one that's like 12 to 14. And I was in the audience. I had nothing else to do because Whitney was backstage. And I'm watching this and I'm going, what in the fuck is this? It's a swimsuit competition with 12-year-olds in heels and tiny bikinis rolling around, twirling. And the way that the lights are and the fabric of the swimsuits, you can see far too much. And it was like, this is the most awkward thing I've ever seen in my life. And, fortunately, that was the last pageant I ever had to go to because I would never go to another one after that because it was so uncomfortable, absolutely uncomfortable. But there's these things that are happening. And then you look at even the younger kids' pageants, full makeup, 6-year-olds, heels, prancing around. It's like, this is not healthy for both kid or for viewer in any way, shape, or form. And that's something that also, like, people are not nearly outraged enough about, in my opinion. Again, the sacred rage, like, stop.
All right.
Stop. Fine. If you want to do pageants, cool. Do pageants when you're 18. That's fine.
Absolutely. I mean, we're fighting this. Really, it's a normalization, a desensitization that I feel is coming upon this world of kids and sexualization is okay. And it's just, they don't understand what they're doing. They're fueling the demand, first of all, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, we talked about this, to bring it up, this film called Cuties that's all over the news right now. And it actually seeks, I watched an interview with the director, and the director said, no, I'm fighting the over-sexualization of children. I'm showing what could happen to them. I'm showing a mirror of society where these young girls, they're like 10, 11, 12 years old, prepubescent girls. And they feel like in order to be popular or to make it, they have to be sexy. And the director said, I'm against it. And I believe her. Her intent was to be against it. But in order to show it, she takes us into such darkness that it really eclipses the light completely. And I believe becomes a tool for evil, unintended. I mean, these clips are, I can't even believe it. I mean, I've seen everything there is to see. And I jerked away when I watched it. I thought, why am I watching this on a mainstream, network where these are crotch shots where like it's up in the girl's crotch and she's dancing sexy and they're touching each other's butts and spreading their legs wide open. You can see like the outline of everything. I'm going, what? Again, prepubescent kids. And one, you're providing content that I promise you every pedophile in America, every one of them has watched that movie 10 times. Mm. And they're going to keep it and they're going to watch it. They don't care that the underlying message from the movie is we're against this. You've provided that material, one. And two, and more, I think profound, is you have now lowered the bar. You've now said it's okay to show this in public because the next movie that shows it won't have the underlying message of we're fighting this. It's not going to matter. It's just going to be, no. They told us it's okay now. It's okay now to put this out there. Again, I'm not questioning the intent of the director or the distributor. I think their intent was probably to do something good and fight it. But if you've been in this fight as long as we've been, we can tell you made a mistake.
Right.
You can tell that story without showing that and helping to really, it's hurting the fight in the end.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And also to understand, I learned something that was really interesting that's always stuck with me. So I was doing some charity work out in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we were going into the slums, Soweto slum. And I know a bit of traditional martial arts. Mostly it's been kickboxing and Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu and things. But I knew enough to at least stand up there with another black belt and help be kind of this strong paternal figure that was teaching traditional martial arts to the kids who, wanted that kind of strength and discipline. And somehow Chuck Norris is still an action hero all around the world, right? Which is interesting enough. So we went there and we were doing this, and the work was really satisfying and also incredibly eye-opening to see slums that are built on hills, just shanty tin shacks where the human sewage was going through. But to see the joy and the light in the kids that were there, it was a really eye-opening experience. But another eye-opening part of that was when we went down to Tanzania. In Tanzania, they have a practice of genital mutilation for young girls, clitorectomies, where they take sharp flint or dirty knives and they actually cut out the clitoris in the woman. And that's supposed to be a rite of passage to make her available to be a bride, right? And it's, of course, you can track this back to the denial of women's pleasure and this absolute rampant insecurity and possession and fear about them wanting to have sex with somebody else and a control mechanism. However, so this is atrocious. This is one of those things that it turns your stomach when you hear that this is happening. But one of the challenges that people who are working with it are facing is that the young women want to do it because they've been taught and conditioned from such an early age that to do this means that you're attractive to men. It means that you're a woman that a man is going to want. And a young woman who's been conditioned that way wants to be a woman that the men want. And so what they're fighting is, even when they put out policies to say, okay, no more genital mutilation, the girls will go to places where they can find it, and do it. So it's not only that we have to create, whatever kind of legal and ramification structure, we also have to tend to the minds that have been conditioned and brainwashed. And to go to the point of the cuties, the over-sexualization and that getting so much attention. And if a kid sees that a woman can just show her ass on Instagram, get 2 million followers and be rich as fuck from all of her ad endorsement deals, and it's like, we're training everybody. And it's not to say stop people from doing that. Fine. If you're an adult, do whatever the hell you want. Absolutely. Live your life. But be mindful that we also have to have some intentional practice to reach the impressionable young kids that are learning from what's working and then trying to mimic that, just some education, some loving, advice saying, your worth is not tied up in your beauty and your sex. Your worth is who you are in your heart. And it doesn't matter any of this stuff. All of this is just superficial nonsense, and just beat that message home so that people feel like, oh, Rao, what's really important is who I am as a person, not what I look like, not what I'm doing sexually. And that's equally important, just as it's important in Tanzania to go to these young girls and say, hey, you don't need to cut off your clitoris to be attractive to a man. There's a whole world of men that will love you and cherish you and want you to have pleasure and get pleasure from you experiencing the pleasure of sexual intercourse and in the union between man and woman. And this is just a small window you've been exposed to. And there's so much more, because it has to be both. It has to be policy and then also loving, nurturing education to help undo some of this conditioning and brainwashing.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I feel like for the first time ever this year, people are seeing it and they're saying what you're saying. And now it's just turn the volume up on it and hope it has the effect.
Yeah. And it's the amplification of the message. And the beautiful thing is these things start to reach, they start to reach tipping points. And it feels like it's getting really close, where it's I believe it's gonna catch a lot of momentum, because it is one of the things that the world can rally behind. And damn if we don't need something that everybody can rally behind. Blue, red, purple, green, black, white. It doesn't matter. Everybody can hold hands and say, let's rally behind this. And that's what we need more than anything. And that's what, of course, all of the kids and all of the women, need more than anything as well.
Absolutely right, man.
Yeah, well.
It's why we call ourselves Operation Underground Railroad, in fact. That was a time where just hatred and divisiveness and racism, right? But there was a group of people. I mean, the Underground Railroad was made up of black, white, Mexicans were part of it, Germans, Americans. They all, it didn't matter of different races, religions. They all came together, dropped the prejudice, and said, there's something greater than all of us. And that is that human bondage is evil. And let's rally. And I love that part of the Underground Railroad of we need that today. We need Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, was one who kind of taught me that. He's like, We need the Underground Railroad today. If nothing else, of course, to save kids, but to find that rallying cry that everybody can get behind. And then we can start to love each other as we fight together to rescue kids.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody listening to know that, like, I'm in this 100%, man. And normally I wouldn't do this. I give a lot of my donations, quietly. But I wanted to give you this on air just to encourage people to do the same and to just do what you can. So here's a check for $100,000.
Oh my gosh, man. Unbelievable.
Oh, you are?
Thanks, bro.
You're welcome, brother.
Man. Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We can do a lot with this. In fact, we're going to track this, tell you what we did with it, and I'll come back out here and report to everybody what we did.
Amazing. And everybody who's watching or listening, like, whatever you have, even if it's just your words, even if it's just a repost or it's a share, and it doesn't have to be money, it can be anything. It can be even energetically, in your nightly
Absolutely.
prayer.
Absolutely.
If you think about those kids and you connect to it, that's something.
We believe in that, and we use that as well.
Everything that we can do collectively together, it's worth it. It's worth it.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everything you've done, brother.
Thank you, Aubrey. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So much love to everybody out there. Talk to you next week. Thanks for checking out this video. For more like it, please subscribe to my channel. And of course, the Aubrey Marcus podcast with new episodes every single week. And follow me on Instagram @Aubrey Marcus. Thank you so much.